Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well, and let's kind of chat a little bit about the field trip. Now, I'll sometimes refer to this as a regional resource assignment simply because I go back and forth in my head and I always forget which one I actually put in the syllabi and which one I actually put in the rubric, so you get to hear both. So if I say field trip, regional resource, you kind of know what this is, what we're talking about. And so the idea of this is that learning doesn't always take place inside the classroom, inside the walls of your school. A lot of time learning goes into, what's outside the environment. So I want you to actually go somewhere outside of your school, somewhere that you might take your students on as a field trip. Now, as a teacher, I used to do this. We would go to Six Flags Physics Day. But the problem was that I never really took advantage of what my students could be learning. I never did the post lessons, I never did follow up. It was just, hey, let's go have fun, let's do a couple activities there. And there was really no sense of cohesiveness to it. So, as you're doing this project, you pretty much get to choose for Science 40 through 13 where you want to go, what you want to do as long as it's anything like science or related. So if you want to go to the beach, talk about um, erosion. If you want to go to the mangroves, talk about ecosystems. If you want to go to Busch Gardens, physical science. If you want to do Busch Gardens, talk about life science. You want to do Disney World. You kind of get the idea. So if we're not in a pandemic, normally you would have to actually go to the place. But if we're in a pandemic and situations like that make it impossible or not, so that you're not comfortable with going, completely understand. If you want to do a nature trail, perfectly fine too. So you choose the location that you would want to take your students to. So for part one, what location did you choose and why? Now I'm going to scroll down to the rubric here. If you only give me the location, that's one thing. Location with brief reason. So you can say, I opted to go to the beach because it's close by to where I live. Well, that's a brief reason. However, if you say something like, I opted to go to this particular nature park because there's some great examples of different type of floras and faunas. And so since I'm teaching life science and we're going to be studying classification, I thought going to this park would be a great spot to practice some of their classification skills. You see the difference in the reasoning between the two. One is a two, the one I gave you would be a three. Okay? So, what areas of science would the trip address and why? So, be sure to include the relevant standards. So, again, if you look down at the standards, um, what's the standard and the rationale? So, how does it cover it? So, why does it address this particular standard? Address, online location, are there any contacts? So, is there a person where it's like, oh, I'd like to reach out to someone from what I did? Now, since I'm in the middle of planet, since we're in the middle of a pandemic and you may not necessarily be able to go, you don't necessarily have to take pictures that you took. However, if you do go there yourselves, please include the pictures that you took and give the captions. So make sure you include that in there. Um, put that in right now. Next, describe the physical facilities. Tell me about the place. Now in C, this is the one that typically gets a lot of people confused is the content. So I need you to actually describe the content. So let's think about that classification system. I would want you to give me a brief paragraph talking about the classification of plants. What resources do they offer? So this could be online resources. It could be things that they allow you to do. So like the aquarium, Clearwater, you might be able to do an overnight stay. Do they come to your school? Now, what would it cost to take a group of 24 students? Meals, admission tickets, busing. You might need to figure out, talk to someone in your school. What does it cost to take a bus? Any other expenses that they would need. A lot of people tend to forget busing, so make sure you put that one in. Now, for the real meat of the lesson is the pre and the post lesson. So, where does it fall into curriculum? Be sure to tell me why you're placing it there. So, if it's before a topic, why are you putting it before there? If it's after, so just make sure I understand the logical placement of where it's going in and why you're putting it there. What do you do to introduce this trip prior? So how do you get your students ready to go? And this includes any resources you might be using. So I don't really need a full lesson. You can give me a paragraph, but if you're doing like, oh, we'll watch a video, we'll do some activities, give me a link to the video. If you notice in the rubric down here, category two is a well thought out explanation for the free points is category two with resources provided. Okay, so that means you need to provide me some resources to get the full points for this one. How do you accommodate your students who could not go on the trip? How do you work with your ESE students? And then finally is the reflection. So would you want to go on your trip with the students here? Why or not? Yes, I would love to. I think it would be great. Well, if I look at the rubric, explanation is making now, probably hopefully you realize I'm going to give you a answer. If you say, yes, I would love to go to great, the ability to classify various plans at this card exceeds what I could do within my card. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity. You see how the reflection is a little bit more thought out than gets it. So this is your um, rubric about your field trip or resources. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. Meantime,